I'm Kristel Unterschultz from Urban Systems. Diane Wirtz is the project manager with the City of Edmonton, and she wasn't able to be here today. But we were really happy that she asked us. Also with me is Liliana Bozic of Urban Systems, who's another one of the team members. There's actually been a lot of people, both on the consultant side and the city side, that have really contributed to and are continuing to contribute to its development. So just before diving straight into the actual development of the strategy, I did want to touch on the name a little bit, because we're actually really excited to have a name. It's, oddly enough, one of the most challenging aspects of this project has been coming up with a brand that everybody could really get behind. It was initially referred to when it was conceived as the Zero Discharge Vision Strategy. And it lived with this name for the first year and a half of its life. And the thinking behind the Zero Discharge Vision is that the City of Edmonton was moving towards a position of zero pollutant discharge to the North Saskatchewan River. Unfortunately, it really did provide and generate a lot of confusion. I know even among my own coworkers, I'd have people asking me, like, what's that zero discharge thing about? Are you trying to stop discharge to the North Saskatchewan River? Like, don't we want water to keep going there? So it did go through a pretty extensive rebranding, which I mentioned did take a year and a half and about 3 communications consultants. We went through focus groups, and at the end of the day, after focus testing 3 different options, River for Life came through as really a resounding vote of confidence behind that. And it really became clear, both focus testing involved professionals within the City of Edmonton from various departments, and a group of just a cross-section of Edmontonians across the city from different backgrounds, educational and otherwise. And the people identify with the North Saskatchewan River as being very much an emotional connection to their city, to their watershed, and they can get behind that. And the tagline, "Our water, our city, our future," was seen as a call for action. So about the project itself, it is aimed at developing a 30-year plan to eliminate pollutant loading to the North Saskatchewan River. It's a pretty big goal and pretty daunting, but as I mentioned, we actually started work on this project in fall of 2011, and it's been a really exciting project and a lot of fun to be involved in. So some of the overarching policy documents that contribute to this. A few years back, the City of Edmonton launched basically a rework of their key policy documents, referred to as the Way Ahead. And the Way Ahead has about 6 constituent documents underneath it, which relate to the Way We Green is their key environmental document, and then there's the other ways, the way we move, the way we grow. But under the Way We Green, some of the strategic directions were specifically aimed at water quality and the protection of the North Saskatchewan watershed. And so River for Life represents their key water quality strategic document. So it's being carried out over 3 project phases and about 3 to 4 years. The first phase wrapped up in spring of last year, and that was the framework phase, where we really focused on developing a skeleton that would guide development of the strategy. And phase 2 is implementation. We're about midway through this process right now, and that will identify and formulate the plans that we move forward with. And phase 3, we expect to take place over 2013 and 2014, and that'll be aimed at developing a financing plan to actually pay for all the things we're going to recommend in the implementation. So as far as my presentation today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time, well, most of the time talking about the framework, what our approach to developing it was, the key findings, and the proposed framework structure, and then I'll speak a little bit about implementation and where we're going moving forward with that. So the actual framework development encompassed a number of components. We did do some visioning with the city at the onset of the project to really get a better understanding of what the key drivers for the project were, and really set up some guiding principles for us moving forward to just some guideposts. We worked closely with Golder Associates to identify what are the target pollutants for Edmonton in the North Saskatchewan watershed. It included a policy and regulatory review, a comprehensive jurisdictional review of what was going on in other communities. Included a communications consultant that looked at public perceptions of river water quality in the North Saskatchewan River, and pretty extensive engagement with primarily internal as well as external stakeholders. So as far as the key drivers, there's a number of the usual suspects that you'd probably expect to see. But for drainage services in particular, this really represented a shift for them in thinking towards a holistic approach. Traditionally, their water quality had been taken on in a systems-based approach with combined sanitary and stormwater systems being handled through separate strategies. And River for Life was really the drive to create an umbrella strategy that would incorporate all aspects of water quality in the municipal discharge pathways. So as part of Golder's scope, the pollutants that were identified were based on a suite of criteria, including regulatory requirements, whether it was under the city's current approval to operate, what the relevance to Edmonton was, that being whether it's natural or anthropogenic in region, in nature, as well as whether the activities by drainage services and the City of Edmonton would actually influence that particular pollutant. And at the end of all that, we actually ended up with a list of between 30 and 40 pollutants that were identified, and based on that suite of criteria, they were ranked as being of primary concern either in the short, medium, or long-term time horizon. A few of the other major components, we did do a regulatory and policy review, which included both federal and provincial policy documents, as well as key planning documents from the North Saskatchewan Watershed Alliance. And a really major component of the project was a jurisdictional review, and that looked at a number of cities across North America, as well as a broad-based European review. And the cities that were selected were either selected because they were recognized as being cold climate cities, or because they had particularly progressive approaches to water management. I won't go into gory detail on what we learned from each of them, but we did take away some really key lessons from them. And I think first and foremost, some of the things that cropped up were that the really successful management plans viewed water as a resource in all its forms, and they incorporated a really strong public engagement and citizen engagement programs, like across the board. Effective internal and external stakeholder partnerships was also really important, especially because so many of the municipalities were quite large, complex institutions. Internal stakeholder engagement and coordination was really important. There's so many departments in any city that really impact water quality that the cities that were doing it well and are doing it well have incorporated an interdepartmental task force in some form to move their programs forward, that they actually are gathering input and ideas and working together. I think in the most extreme forms, it's actually consisted of an entire staff department that would move it forward. And of course, leading by example. The successful plans really put forward programs that they were doing within their own city, their own land, whether it was implementing green infrastructure, whether it was conservation within city operations, or green buildings. And some of the effective tools, by and large, the most important one that came across was performance-based standards, not prescriptive, and standards that were actually supported by guidance documents for developers and others. Some of them had special zoning rules, just interesting things that we came across. If there was highly impervious areas like parking lots, that they'd be required to implement planted areas, bioswales, that sort of thing. Demonstration projects were huge, not only just as a test drive technologies that may be somewhat unproven at this time, but also if they were located in a public environment, that it was a real opportunity to raise awareness. And actually, in a lot of cases, some of the demonstration projects became implemented on a much larger scale shortly thereafter. Programs that were implemented, projects were determined and selected on a triple bottom line analysis. It wasn't just about environmental benefit, it included economic considerations and social considerations. And they incorporated an adaptive management process so that that progress towards a goal, specific goals, was measured and reported on, and as needed, their approaches were revised. Stakeholder consultation, huge in this project, really huge. The core working group on the part of the City of Edmonton was really significant. We would sit down to pretty regular meetings of 10 to 15 people from drainage services, and they've all been really excited, really passionate and engaged throughout the project, and it's been a good learning experience, and it's really been a collaborative approach right from the start. We have had some consultation with external stakeholders, primarily through the communications consultant that was working with us, and those key external stakeholders have had input into and had a chance to review the draft framework. And also just engaging other departments. Key milestones within the project, we have tried to incorporate input from other departments, especially those that have a significant impact on water quality. So that included parks, planning, landscape, buildings and landscape services, and transportation, most notably. So taking all this information and really trying to distill it down into a framework, we wanted to spend some time and clarify what were the key objectives that would really, enact a change in the water quality. And so we did still come back to the three key discharge pathways of stormwater, wastewater, and combined sewers for the City of Edmonton, and identified that there's two mechanisms for each of those pathways that the city could either address the quantity and or the quality impact of that component of that pathway to enact change. And the framework itself is centered around 4 strategic directions. The first one being to align policies, strategies, and programs. The second one, to make sure that it's sustainable into the future. The third one, to engage residents and stakeholders. And the fourth one, to provide the means for implementation. So the first direction, alignment, is really just to make sure that all of the strategies, policies, and programs are aligned with the River for Life vision. And we see there being 2 key components to this. The first one is that the actual departments within the city are aligned with each other and with River for Life vision, and also in a broader context that the River for Life is aligned with the broader watershed initiatives. Sustainability, we actually tried for a while to think if we could come up with a different word, because sustainability is so overused, but at the end of the day, sustainability is the only name for this direction, and it makes sense because we wanted to make sure that moving forward, the River for Life strategy would ensure that we had the key capacity to drive the strategy, that the staff had the skill set, the support, and the mandate to move it forward, that there was funding to actually pay for the strategy at the end of the day, and that there would be a long-term adaptive management process to move it forward and make sure that it's a living document, that it changes to responding conditions over time. Engagement, as I mentioned, whether it's coming up with a strategy name or just continuing to understand where the public and key stakeholders are at, engagement will be a huge component of this program. And the key desired outcomes that we wanted to identify as part of that engagement strategic direction would be public education and outreach, that residents are informed and encouraged to make change within their own daily behavior, that internal stakeholder engagement is present within the City of Edmonton, that it actually fosters a spirit of collaboration, and that strong external stakeholder engagement is maintained and enhanced. And the final, strategic direction implementation, really is just, I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road, and it's making sure that this strategy is something that's actually doable at the end of the day. The key desired outcomes for it moving forward is that there is master planning that's in place for each of the sub-watersheds within the City of Edmonton that recommend a cost-effective mix of public and private facilities. That the guidelines, incentives, and other tools are there to provide encouragement and to provide the necessary technical support. And the public facilities are designed and constructed to reduce pollutant discharge, and finally that there is support for ongoing research moving forward to improve implementation, to understand what the benefits are of the infrastructure that's being put into place, and making sure that the city is being as innovative and as effective as possible. So as far as where we're moving now, I mentioned we are about midway through the implementation plan development, and it does include the typical things that you would expect as far as a list of prioritized and recommended projects moving forward. But one of the things that we are seeing as a really critical component moving forward is the public awareness and public engagement component. And I think, especially within the near-term implementation plan, that's going to be a really big component. And I know that one of the things Diane was really hoping to get out of this session today is hearing any ideas that any of you may have with regard to collaboration opportunities for raising public awareness, public engagement. I think there's a lot of organizations in the room here today that are all trying to get to the same point. And I know I would love to hear your thoughts, and if any of you want to contact Diane directly, I want to put her information up there.